A while ago, I started noticing something that isn't actually making sense. Two players could be the same account age, same kingdom, similar power, similar progression, but one player always seems to have resources and the other one was permanently broke. No screws, no food, no gold, nothing. At first, I assumed the answer was spending. Maybe one player was buying packs, maybe one player was luckier, maybe one player was managing resource better. But then I start noticing. But then I start looking closer, and that's when I noticed something strange. The broke player weren't usually making huge mistakes. They were making lots of small ones. And honestly, that's much scarier. Because huge mistakes are easy to be avoided. Small mistakes feel productive. That's what's making them dangerous. I start paying attention after seeing players' discussion about the screws shortage. I have a separate video about this, and the common explanation was always, "I don't know what happened," which is kind of funny because usually something did happen, just not all at once. One hero to level 40, another hero to level 50, a support hero to level 60, a healer gets some levels, then another hero gets some levels. Nothing feels expensive. Every individual upgrade feels harmless. But eventually you look at your account and wonder where are all of your resources went. And that's where I think people are making a mistake. Because players often look at upgrades individually. The game charge you correctly, and those are two completely different perspectives. Then I start asking myself a question. Is leveling many heroes actually making the account stronger? Or does it feel like a progress? Because those aren't always the same things. And honestly, I think this is where the conversation get interesting. Most players understand only one extreme. If you only level one hero forever, your roster becomes too narrow. If you are already seen, and we have seen this happen. One carry, no support, no healers, no flexibility, bad idea. But the positive extreme exists too, and people talk about it much less. A roster that is wild enough to look impressive, but not deep enough to actually solve problems. And I have been definitely being guilty of this. You unlock a hero, you want to try them, you get another hero, you want to test them too, you read a recommendation, now another hero needs level. Before long, you're investing everywhere, and the account feels busy. The account feels active. The account feels productive, but is it actually progressing? That's the question. Then I noticed something that completely changed how I look at the resource spending. Not all levels are equal. And I know that sounds obvious, but not all levels are equal. But I don't think most players actually think that way. A hero going from level 20 to level 60 is not the same decision as a hero going from level 900, level 90 to level 100. The costs are different, the impact are different, the bottlenecks are different, the opportunity costs are different, yet many players treat them as identical. They are both upgrade, so they both feels good. But then I start looking at where resources were disappearing. And the answer wasn't where I expected. It was one giant investment. It wasn't one giant investment. It was dozens of medium investments, which creates another question. When does roster deep stop being useful? Because obviously roster deep matter. Nobody wants one hero account, but at same point, every extra investment gives less value than the previous one. And I don't think players notice when they're cross that line, especially in the mid game. Because the mid game is full of exciting heroes, everything looks useful, everything looks important, everything looks worth building, and that's probably why so many players suddenly find themselves resource poor. Not because they built a bad hero, because they built too many good heroes. That's a completely different problem. Then things got even more interesting because eventually I noticed that some players weren't actually scroll limited. They thought they are, but they aren't. They were food limited. And that's a huge difference because if food is the bottleneck, then panicking about screws doesn't really solve anything. The account isn't being swallowed by the resources you think, and that's where I think many players incidentally optimize the wrong things. They focus on the resources that are dropping instead of the resources that block progress. And to be fair, I'm guilty a little over this. I start building a lot of farms the moment I start hitting that wall where I just get requested to have more and more food. And even at the moment, I still didn't actually level up anything. I have my resources right here ready to go. But it was not actually the screw, something that I believe in the beginning. It was actually the food. And yeah, just the resources that are blocking the progress, that are hard to get. It's not always the same like the resources that are can be dropped in the fight. Then I started looking at stronger accounts again, and something stood out. They seems much more selective, not necessarily more disciplined, just more selective. That's an important difference. They weren't refusing to build the heroes, they were asking harder question. Why I'm building this hero? What content become easier if I build this hero? What I'm giving up to do this? Because you're going to give it up something here, and most of the times it's your account flexibility in the future when you get a hero that you know exactly where you want to put. And honestly, that's not how most of us play. Most of us see cool hero and think, yeah, let's build that, which is fun. I have been done this too, but fun and efficiency are not always friends, and that's where I think the real trap exists because this isn't a story about bad investment. It's a story about too many decent investments. The accounts slowly leak resources. Nothing look wrong. Nothing feels wrong until one day something important arrives, a new hero, a major update, a progression wall, and suddenly you don't have the resources you thought you had. That's when all those harmless upgrades come back into the conversation. Not because they were individual bad, because together they become expensive. And maybe that's the biggest realization I have had about the resource management. Most accounts aren't destroying by one terrible decision, they are shaped by hundreds of tiny ones. Some good, some bad, some unnecessary, and the hard part is figuring out which is which before the bill arrive. So now I'm curious, what's the biggest resource trap you have even fallen into? Building into too many heroes or building too few? Or you're looking at your account right now wondering where all of your screws or food disappeared to. So this is going to be my 2 cents over this whole situation with the upgrades of the heroes and the resources. This is what I believe is actually the issue or the core issue. I start both ways. I start with a single hero, build it. It was actually my Medusa. Then I go over many heroes that have to be builded. But actually, the game forced me at one point. If I want to progress in the treasure hunt, is just needing more more teams there. So yeah, this will be for this video, guys. Don't forget to hit one like, subscribe for more Heroes of History Epic Empire content. If you want to directly support my channel, you can become a member. You're going to find this join button next to the video. I wish you a great day and see you in the next video.